Shalom, y'all. Welcome back to Light of the Scroll. I'm Jennifer, and I'm your host. Again, thank you for coming and listening every week or every 2 weeks. I definitely appreciate it. I would most certainly love to hear from y'all. If you can leave comments or rate the podcast or send a text. I know on Spotify, the send us a text is at the beginning of the description. Reach out. I would love to hear from you. Hopefully, if you if you're subscribed to the podcast, if you're subscribed to the podcast, or if you're in the Facebook group, then you knew that a bonus episode went out, and hopefully you enjoyed that. This episode is the regular bi-weekly episode. Again, thank you all for coming and listening. So we are in the midst of Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles. You can find this in Leviticus in the feasts. This is the very last feast of the year. This is a feast where we are commanded to be joyful and rejoice, thankful. So it's 7 days, and then you have the 8th great day. So a lot of people have not heard of the 8th great day, probably up until last year when you heard about Israel getting attacked on the 8th great day. So that would have been the last fall feast, the last feast, which would have been the fall feast. There's 3 fall feasts, and Israel got attacked on the 8th great day. So the 8th great day is a super joyful day. And so that's coming up and being in the midst of it. So basically you are to dwell in a temporary dwelling, eat in a temporary dwelling. We built a sukkah. We decorated it with tree limbs and lights. Ate under there some of the nights because it was super windy sometimes. It wasn't the best weather, at least in the mornings or at night sometimes during Sukkot for this one. But it was mine and Steve's first one actually sleeping in a tent, and we slept in a tent for half of it. We have 3 dachshunds, and we didn't want them. They could have been with us, but they don't share the bed very well, and I don't sleep very well with them. So they didn't stay with us at where we were at. So we would come home to take care of the sheep. We'd be home for 20, 30 minutes, couple hours, depending on the day, depending on what we had going on, and hang out with the dogs, take care of the sheep. And then we felt bad for the dogs, so then we ended up coming home the last couple of days of Sukkot and being home. So Sukkot is, like I said, we're meant to be joyful. And why do we believe that these things are applicable? Well, these things are applicable because we believe that the whole Bible is applicable to us today. Steve and I in our fellowship, we don't believe that the Old Testament is strictly for the Jewish people. And I know I've said it before, but there were others that came out with Moses and the Israelites. The Israelites, they are not Jews in the Old Testament. They are Israelites. Calling them Jews is a modern day thing. I believe well after Yeshua with the translations. I think that's a man-made translation. I don't think that being a Jew mattered because of the fact that there were others that came out with Moses and the Israelites when they were allowed to leave Egypt. And then if you continue and read on in Exodus, after they fled and Moses went up to Mount Sinai and he comes back down, he gives the law to everybody who is there. And it doesn't say that anybody who wasn't an Israelite left. They were grafted in. They were immediately grafted in, and they were given the law. So regardless if they were, I'm going to do quote, Jews, they were all grafted in as an Israelite, whether they were Hebrew or Egyptian. Okay, it was never it was never given that it was just Hebrews, even and because it did say the Egyptians came out with them. It says, and many others came as well, and their livestock. So it was given to everybody. And so when you're grafted in, what does that look like? Well, I mean, you can watch YouTube videos and learn how to graft a tree, any tree. And when you graft that tree and it's successful, and then you're able to plant it in the ground, can you tell 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now where that tree was grafted in at? You, the person who grafted that tree in, I don't know, I've never paid attention, but maybe you can tell. But for just somebody just coming along who had no idea, you would not be able to tell that was a grafted in tree. So if you're not able to tell that was a grafted in tree, then how are we able to tell the different denominations in Christianity when there is one Christ, one Messiah? We shouldn't be able to. He is the way, the truth, the life. Well, what did Yeshua do? Let's take those words that were so famous, back in the 90s, and people wearing the bracelets, WWJD. What would Yeshua do? Well, in John 7, that is Yeshua going to the Feast of Tabernacles, submersing himself in the Feast of Tabernacles, teaching during it. Not during all of it, because, go and read John 7 yourself. But Yeshua did it. Oh, well, that's because he was a Jew. I really think that, no, I don't. No, you don't get to pick and choose. That's where picking and choosing as a Christian is hypocrisy. If you read the whole Bible and do what the whole Bible says, then you can see that there is no hypocrisy, no contradictions anywhere. If you apply the whole Bible, it just really baffles my mind that I just made a post on Facebook the other day. There are 8 holy days in the Bible, and modern Christianity observes none of them. Okay. As a Gentile, if you will, let's go back just half a second here. Okay, so when the Egyptians came out with the Israelites out of Egypt, when Yahweh gave Moses the laws, he said, don't do what the pagans do. Don't do this. Don't craft any statues, any wooden images, nothing. Don't do this that the pagans would do, and don't do that the pagans would do. Well, who were the pagans? That would have been the Gentiles. So in the Old Testament, if you take out the word pagan and put Gentile, that's the way I see it. And then in the New Testament, they took out pagan and put Gentile. They just made it sound different, which that's where the contradictory, in my opinion, comes from. If it's translated in this way and this way, that's just the way I see it. Or Gentile is a person who didn't follow God. I don't know. That's where it gets super confusing. Like, there's something in the translation that somebody is not adding up, that somebody did. I don't trust it. So that's why we follow the whole Bible. You don't get a book. If you're going to buy a book series, like this was part of can't go into that tangent. That was the bonus episode. Go back and go listen to that about starting in the middle of a book. Again, that's where that comes in too. But John 7. So typically I'm not going to read anything, but we are at the Feast of Tabernacles. So here is John 7, starting in verse 1. After these things, Jesus was walking in Galilee. And this is after there were some disciples that left Yeshua because of him saying that he was the so let's go back, because here's some context for you, right? So here is John 6, verse 41. Therefore the Jews were grumbling about him because he said, I am the bread that came down out of heaven. They were saying, is not this Yeshua, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How does he now say, I have come down out of heaven? Yeshua answered and said to them, Do not grumble among yourselves. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught of Yahweh. Everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father, except the one who is from God, Yahweh, he has seen the Father. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. So this is referencing Exodus in the wilderness with Moses, because Yahweh provided the manna in the ground. This is the bread which comes down out of heaven, so that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down out of heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread also which I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. Then the Jews began to argue with one another, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? And then if we skip to verse 54, he who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so he who eats me, he also will live because of me. And so this is so then some disciples actually left. So there was more than 12 disciples, ? But why did they get mad at Jesus? Why did they get mad at Yeshua for this? Because it's part of the law that you can't eat of the flesh, right? So they thought he was being literal, right? What he was saying is that in order to come to the Father, you must come through me. Your forefathers ate out of the wilderness from the manna. So I am the bread and I am the wine. Because Yeshua is the one who will guide us, and we aren't thirsty with him. We aren't hungry with him. His word is his flesh, his body, anyway. So there were disciples that left Yeshua. So there's actually more than 12 disciples from reading this. But that's never talked about, that there were people who left Yeshua. It sounds like there was more than 12, but he already knew who was the one. So when it says, when I was, just before reading this, before coming into this walk, and it does say that he already knew who was going to betray him. I always thought it was just the one, but there was more, because there was more that left, right? So then when we go into John chapter 7, we are at the Feast of Tabernacles. So after these things, Jesus was walking in Galilee, for he was unwilling to walk in Judah because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now, I honestly believe that is a translation of, I don't believe that the original translation said Jews. I don't know. And maybe it does. But to me, that is the tribe of Judah and not just a Jewish thing, because the new translation makes it sound like it's a Jewish thing, which really, sorry. Now, the Feast of the Jews, the Feast of Booths was near, or the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. Therefore, his brothers said to him, leave here and go into Judea, so that your disciples also may see your works which you are doing. For no one does anything in secret when he himself seeks to be known publicly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world, for not even his brothers were believing in him. So Yeshua said to them, my time is not yet here, but your time is always opportune. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it, that its deeds are evil. Go up to the feast yourselves. I do not go up to this feast because my time has not fully come. Having said these things to them, he stayed in Galilee. But when his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he himself also went up, not publicly, but as if in secret, because the Jews were trying to. So he went and followed behind them, probably to make sure that they were going to do what he said to do. So the Jews were seeking him at the feast and were saying, where is he? There was much grumbling among the crowds concerning him. Some were saying, "He is a good man." Others were saying, "No, on the contrary, he leads the people astray." Yet no one was speaking openly of him for fear of the Jews. But when it was now the midst of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and began to teach. The Jews then were astonished, saying, "How has this man become learned, having never been educated?" So Yeshua answered them and said, "My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone is willing to do his will, he will know of the teaching, whether it is of God or whether I speak for myself." So that, if you read the word from the beginning to the end, you're gonna see where that is, right? You're gonna, it's Yah's word, not what man says. He who speaks for himself seeks his own glory. But he who is seeking the glory of the one who sent him, he is true, and there is no unrighteousness in him. So he who speaks from himself seeks his own glory. So this goes into, are you living your life because it's a good thing to go to church? It's a good thing to say that you believe in God? Or are you going to church and living your life and believing in God and Yeshua because that's what your heart fully believes? Don't do this just because it's the right thing to do. It's what people do. It's how I want to raise my kids. Does your heart say that that's the right thing to do? If so, then he who is seeking the glory of the one who sent him, he is true, and there is no unrighteousness in him. But if you speak for yourself to seek your own glory, then there is unrighteous in you. So when you're going through your daily life, do you ever catch yourself saying, "I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do that, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I. If you are in this walk and you catch yourself doing that, I don't think that that's okay. What we should be doing, there's times where we can say I, but really there are a lot of our times we should be seeking God and asking his permission if we should do certain things. Abba Yahweh. Like Steve and I, we were convicted of, we slept out. We did half our time with Sukkot, in a tent. And then we came home because we have responsibilities here. But I did what my husband said to do. And he did what his father said to do. He felt that it was okay to come home after talking to Yahweh. He didn't just come home because he wanted to come home, right? And not everything we do is because we're stopping and asking for God. The majority of stuff, yes, we do. I believe that's what we need to do on a daily basis. If we're starting to say I, then we're not living for Yah. We're living for ourselves. And that's not what we're not supposed to do. You can go be a Gentile or a pagan and do all that. You don't need God in the picture if you're not going to have him in the picture, only when it's convenient for you. He's waited for you. He's waited for you, and he's still waiting for you. But at some point, that door's going to shut. And that door's going to shut. I'm not Yahweh, but if you fully believe in God, Yeshua, Yahweh, then give it to him. And don't just go to church because it's now the cool thing or it's the right thing. And I'm just going to give him an hour on Sunday. Well, here's the thing. In the Old Testament, it's okay. If you're not there yet to where you believe that Saturday is the Sabbath, eventually I pray that Yah gives that to you. But that's not for me to convict you of. I'm just just talking in general about just certain different things. Anyways, if you do a Sunday Sabbath, you can look in the Old Testament and see what a Sabbath is supposed to be. So if you open up a Catholic Bible, it'll say in there that they had the power to change the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. Since when do they have the power to do that? And I thought God didn't change. I thought Yah didn't change. So why would he change his Sabbath? Or why would he tell the Catholics, we're going to change my Sabbath to Sunday now, guys. But remember, I change not, but I'm going to change my Sabbath because I don't like it on Saturday anymore. I want it on Sunday. No. They said they had the power. No man has the power to be Yah. Not in that type of context. I'm sorry. So that's why we also believe that the Sabbath is Saturday and not Sunday. But if you feel that Sunday is okay, that's fine. Look in the Old Testament to see how you are supposed to do the Sabbath. It tells you. And one of the 10 commandments is to observe my Sabbath and remember my Sabbath, which means you should be doing it the way Yahweh told you to do it in the Old Testament. That's strictly for the Jews, apparently, which that's why I fully believe that this is the way to follow, because any church, any modern day church, and I hate to bash on the church, but you need to think for yourself, and you need to be, whatever your conviction is, you need to be, and maybe listening to this podcast, and I don't know, maybe listening to this podcast is now gonna, after this one, you're never gonna listen to this ever again because you're like, that lady is crazy. I don't know, but maybe God is trying to show you something and say, look, I don't know. All I know is that the feasts are soon to be over, and I am so saddened by that, and I am already looking forward to Passover in the spring. I love honoring and remembering the feasts that our Creator gave us in the Old Testament. And I could be wrong, but if I really wasn't supposed to be celebrating this festival or this feast or any of the holy days, I'm pretty sure that some of the blessings that Steve and I have seen over the last few years, God wouldn't have given them to us. But he has. So it really makes me, I don't know, and maybe that's just going on a tangent and I'm not saying that I'm any better than anybody else, because here's the thing. God is going to give you, if you truly bring God into your daily life, he's going to give you what you need to do. You're going to learn to hear his voice. You're going to know what that sounds like. And if we are in the end of days, we're going to need to know what that is. We're going to need to know what his voice sounds like. That's what preparing, that's, when the women were preparing for the wedding feast, and some of them didn't have enough oil, and the other ones, some had enough oil, and they're like, oh, share your oil with us, we are going to run out. And they were like, if we share our oil with you, we won't have enough, and we won't make it either, and none of us will be able to go to the wedding feast. And then the ones who were running out of oil, left to go buy some oil, and then they came back and the doors were closed, and Yeshua's Liz, I don't know you. Right now is making sure that we are getting God in our lives every day, and asking him for guidance and discernment, and just speaking with him, and not saying I the majority of the time. We need to Yah the majority of the time, because when that time comes, if we are here, we need to know what his voice sounds like, so that way we don't miss the door. The door will be open. We won't be deceived if we know what his voice looks like. And that's one thing that I guess we were never... Church just gives you all the goody feels of, but you know what? We've had the milk. I'm not a little toddler anymore that needs mom's milk. I want some food. Where's the meat? The meat is now, you need to give God everything every day, and not just an hour of your time once a week. He needs your time every day. You need his time every day. Anyways, I hope that wasn't too much of a tangent, too much of a rant. Please, y'all, let me know what you think. I really thank you for listening every episode. I pray that Yah guides you and gives you discernment. I pray that you have a blessed Sabbath. blessed Shabbat if that's the way you follow. If not, have a great weekend, y'all.